Welcome to another conversation with Joan and Tomas Heartfield. I'm Kaylin Costell, so excited to be back with them to talk about the relationship mysteries. And we're again inspired by the fact that the South Node is currently in Libra and has been since July of 2023 and will be until January of 2025. That means that the North Node is in Aries. So Libra represents the relationship to others, and Aries represents the relationship to self. And something I've been noticing, and Joan and I and Tomas and I were talking about this before we got started, is how many people in our community are figuring out whether they're going to stay together. Some of them are not going to stay together. You know, that the whole relationship issue seems to be very present right now. And the reason I feel like this is because the ways we've done relationship in the past was like, I need to find my other half, or the person who's going to complete me or fill me up or help me feel like I'm whole. But if you're not whole within yourself, that's never going to happen. It just isn't going to happen. And I'm going to let you guys speak into that a little more because I know this is an area of specialty for you. But you're not also, it's like, how do you be whole within yourself, and then you can be more whole within the relationship. So I guess I'll pass it on here and we can talk. You guys can share what your experiences have been around this, and how the astrological mysteries help us to understand that a little better.
Beautiful.
Yeah, well, Joan could certainly address that, but I would just perhaps start by recognizing in the many couples we work with, young couples and older relationships alike, when we come together, generally, I think we all kind of know we present our sparkly selves, and when we date, when you look at the dating sites, people want to augment and basically turn up their appearance and their aspects of their personality that are most appealing. And we all know that when we get in a relationship, we get into the deeper conversations usually quite quickly, and then we have to start actually buckle down and do some work.
Yeah. And I think this is what couples are, at least in our community, are starting to see is that we're really finding more couples are really wanting to learn communication skills and learn relationship skills, because they're starting to see, if I can communicate more effectively with my partner, then we have a better chance of really working through the challenges that we have in our relationship. And that certainly could be because of this presentation, let's say, of the South Node of Libra, which is kind of the past, starting to inform us, like, what has been our relationship experiences, how successful have they been? And if I'm in another relationship, how can I make this relationship more successful than my last relationship? And that's what we're seeing a lot of people are coming to presenting with right now.
I love that so much, because if we think about the South Node in Libra, about relationships and how we relate to others, and the North Node in Aries and how we relate to ourselves, and in a culture that has conditioned us to find our other half or to find the person that will complete us, which hasn't really worked out all that well. It's like, if you're not whole and complete within yourself, so we could say that the mission of the North Node, the destiny, the direction we're headed in, is to commit to being whole within yourself, to really knowing who you are, so you can show up authentically in whatever relationships you might be engaging in, but especially a primary relationship. And so, and Aries will commit to that if it knows that's what it needs to commit to. So, yeah.
And actually, I had an experience this morning with a mother-daughter. The daughter called me crying because she was back home with her mother, and old patterns were coming up, with the mother. And she'd been working with me here on Maui, and, going, God, I love my mother. I want to go back and tell her how much I love her. Well, of course, as soon as they got home and the old patterns began coming up, then the old patterns of hers began coming up. So I suggested that she, and so she was in a place where she just had a challenging experience with her mother, and she wanted to know, what do I do next? And I said, why don't you go back, because your mother obviously doesn't have this the resources. She hasn't done her own personal work as the daughter is doing. But why don't you tell your mother, look, I really want to get to the bottom of these patterns. These are old patterns we've had since childhood. I'd like to do a therapy session with you where we can sort this out because I want to have a good relationship with you. So it's kind of like looking at those old patterns and then going forward and going, because the daughter is becoming more of herself now. She knows who she is. She wants to have a good relationship with her mom, but she doesn't know how by herself because, people need help usually in sorting out relationship problems from the past.
Yeah, those old patterns can be so hard to, I mean, even those of us who've done our work, I'm just saying, I know that it's true for me. And I will have these moments where I'm like, whoa, where did that come from? I thought I had dealt with that. And to have in my primary relationship and to have the ability to apologize and to recognize that I got triggered and it really wasn't about you, it was about me and it was about whatever else was going on, to really recognize that and to have those skills to then be able to go deeper and look at what else might need to be looked at. And yeah, so I'm sure you have maybe you have some insights about how people can do that.
Well, it's always about being able to track the quality of connection. And it's just another aspect of the work we do of really giving people a way to access their inner reality and then the sensations in their body. There's a lot of information that's buried in the body in terms of our respiration and our emotional content. And then the way we're couching and the way we're perceiving the situation can change from time to time in the same situation, depending on how plugged in we are.
And also just that whole thing of really, how do we see a situation? And then also, what do we want from the situation? Because Tomas and I have really noticed that having a kind of a template that gives us a forward motion. So for instance, we decided a while ago that we really wanted to have peace and ease in our relationship. And so just first of all, saying, how do we do that? And working on the skill set that allows us to feel peace and ease within ourselves, first and foremost, because again, it comes back to that individual Aries versus, the Libra. If I can make sure that I'm coming to my partner or to a situation with as much ease and peace inside of myself as I can, then I'm going to show up in even a difficult situation, knowing that that's my job. My job is to keep myself in a grounded place where then we can really communicate more successfully about whatever it is, rather than getting hijacked by my emotions. And so that's a huge part of, I think, what really helps people is how do they ground within themselves so they can come to the situation with the resources they need, the inner resources to even to engage in challenging conversations.
And also when things come out of nowhere. So maybe you're going into challenging conversation, you could be prepared for that, but sometimes things come from out of nowhere. And so then to recognize, oh wait, I'm reacting.
And also and I think that's why we practice these things, when we practice, for instance, nonviolent communication, the several years that we really practiced nonviolent communication, we had our nonviolent.
We learned it. We're still practicing.
We're still practicing. We really are learning. We had our NVC packets, in front of us all the time. We were always looking at, well, what's really going on? What do I feel right now? What do I need right now? How can I communicate with my partner in a way that isn't blaming or judging or having perceptions about maybe something that really isn't even true? How can I stay really grounded in myself and then also really listen to what is going on with my partner in a way that makes them feel, have empathy, that I'm really there and I'm also empathizing with them as well as empathizing with myself, in really. So when we practice, I tell them, it's like jujitsu, you go into a dojo and you practice your moves, but you practice them so that if somebody jumps you in a, dark alley, you already have the moves there. They're within you. So I think that's another thing that people don't really realize, that it's not just you learn something and okay, now I have the concept of it. it's really a practice over years that gives the skill sets, the ability to then, when something really does come up, to be able to like, oh, I know how to handle that. I've practiced that enough.
Yeah, we seem to have a baseline in our relationship, and all relationships do that. I call it a baseline. And that's basically the timbre or the quality of the connection.
Mhm.
And when Joan and I got even more devoted to this baseline of peace and ease, because we put out a lot of energy in our work every day. And if we have anything that's out of this baseline, it's going to reflect in our work. And it takes a lot of chi to live in stress. And when we sense that we're out of this baseline, we need to be devoted to it. And if we're noticing that there's more peaks and valleys in our relationship, we have to tighten the valleys up and bring them up so that we don't lose energy. Because when we are in a valley where there's emotional charge, it's much more difficult to navigate and use skills.
Yeah.
Because it takes energy to use skills. And so we're really strong on the peace and ease place where we can stabilize, have a stable sail through life so that we can maneuver through the choppy waters that come just with life, not necessarily from our relationship, with just life in general.
Yeah, that's so true. I would love for you to maybe give us an example of a practice people could work with, that they could take away from this today and start practicing for themselves. And of course, I realize it's the tip of the iceberg, but and I studied a little bit of the uh, compassionate communication years ago. I probably need to get back to it. I'm guessing it would be good for me because I haven't, so I just remember some of it, but I don't have and it was brilliant work. So I just think it would be great to have a little practice for people.
Oh, there's a few that we do. You have one in mind?
Yeah, well, I think that the one that I'm the most familiar with, and the one that really has been helpful, is to understand what our feelings and our needs are.
Yeah.
Because when we feel good, it basically means our needs are being met. When we don't feel good, it means that there's some need that we have that isn't being met. And so you can go online actually and look up like feelings and needs from nonviolent communication, and they'll probably bring you, sheets of different kind of feelings and needs. But most people don't even realize, at least, unless you've done some work, what you feel. It's like I will often say, "What are you feeling right now? What's going on with you?" And it's like, I feel kind of like, but to really understand, to really get connected with our own feelings and then with the needs behind them. So for instance, if I'm feeling, sad, maybe my need of connection or my need of deep emotional involvement is not being met in the way that I'm wanting to at that time. In which case, if I know what my need is, then I can go to my partner and I say, sweetheart, it's been a while since we've really sat down and had a really good chat. And I just want to like sit down on the couch, hold each other, and really talk about, like what my heart is longing for right now, because we just haven't had any time together and I miss it so much and I miss you. So in other words, that need that I have for that deep emotional connection, if I can ask for that in a way rather than saying, you never talk to me anymore, right? All the ways in which you never, kind of gets activated. First of all, the way of, that you never in the blame game is never successful, because they're just going to come back with their own blame game, thing. So that is something that if people can get connected to their feelings and their needs, and really learn to ask for their needs in a way that isn't blaming or judging the other person, wow, your relationship improves 100% overnight.
Dramatically, right? Yeah. I think that you never and you always do this or you always do that, or it's like, no, I don't always do that. No, I never, sometimes it's not that I never do that. It's just that it's like, it's such a blatant statement that can be very triggering for the other person. It's triggering for me, just saying. Yeah. And
Yeah, those words are, you always, takes us into anti-magic.
Yeah, right.
Because these words have power, and a lot of people don't understand the power that they have and how they regulate our energies. And so to have a clear, not necessarily being syrupy positive all the time, but to project anything that has a spin on it is going to spin down in below that ease and peace.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing too, I think is really important is to recognize the difference between perceptions and feelings. And a lot of the way that we have learned to use feelings in our society. I feel like you don't love me, or I feel like I'm being invalidated, or I feel like, I'm, being, shut out. All these are actually perceptions, not feelings. And because a perception means that immediately you can start an argument, because if I say, I feel like, you're ignoring me, the other person can say, what do you mean? I'm not ignoring you. I'm just trying to get through this article I'm trying to read. I'm not trying. So immediately you can start an argument if you are using perceptions as feelings. So if you can start to also understand the difference, a feeling is just, I feel sad, I feel mad, I feel glad, I feel, I feel, rather than, I feel like you're doing this to me, or I feel like, some perception, and you're using it as a feeling. That's a huge one.
Yeah.
So good. That is so good.
The hardest thing to do sometimes is to get into an energetic quality where we can actually talk about tough stuff.
Yeah.
Because we have to kind of get ourselves regulated so that we can do proper exchange with each other and be able to take each other in and also express what's alive in our hearts. And so one thing Marshall taught me one day, taught all of us one time, was a 3-part process that is extremely powerful that you can do with anyone. And it just involves 3 questions, actually. So the first one is, we want to set the stage for what's good, what's really working. Sometimes we even turn it up and we go right into it. Like, how have I made your life more wonderful? I want to know.
That's a great question, isn't it? How have I made your life more wonderful?
And so it kind of
Question.
that, but you can exchange that back and forth. Like, yeah, we've got some good stuff in the mix here. And then we can kind of tweak it a little bit. We can just change one word. We can say, how can I make your life more wonderful? So that takes us into a creative process. Now we can look at, well, if you tell me that you love me at least once a day, that really rocks my world. Because sometimes I forget, and Marsha used to say, do you love me? And his partner would say, when? So because love does flow, it goes up and down. But the third question, get back to the completion of this sidetrack here, is there anything that you'd like to share with me that's a little challenging for you to say? And so we kind of set the table for the most important thing in these conversations, which is safety. So we've created safety. I have value, I have needs, and there's something in the mix. There's a little scrape in the conversation with you that I really want to talk to you about, because I don't want it to get any worse or something like that, And so to get proactive on this does take consciousness and intention, but it pays off all the time when we do it.
I would also add to that willingness, because sometimes people don't seem to be willing to have those more challenging conversations and to look more deeply into those things. So I'm just having this realization too, as we're having this conversation. Mercury is retrograde, and we're talking about communication and perception, which is also, Mercury is not just about communication, it's about perception. So I'm loving that, taking that deeper dive into, it's like what we perceive may not be, it may be our truth or our reality in that moment, but it may not be the greater reality for the other person or for the other people involved, whatever that's about. So I love that you brought that in, and I love those 3 questions. Those are so good to have, and I'll see if I can write them down and put them in the show notes for people. So people
how can I? Is there anything that's challenging to talk about?
Yeah.
Yeah, I will make sure I get those. And if you could send them to me and I'll put them in the show notes, or I'll just go back and listen and get the exact words. But this is so, so good. And uh the willingness, and I'll just say that my husband comes in every day and says, how can I make this a better day for you? Or what can I do to support you today? Or and then the other thing that we do is we celebrate each other, and we celebrate everything we're grateful for about each other and about our lives together. I think that's a great daily practice for people, because it keeps you focused on, things will come up. Yes, they come up, and yes, there's hard times and hard moments, but if you're practicing that every day, oh, it's so good.
It's like money in the bank,
Yeah.
basically what you're doing is you're putting money in the bank of your relationship, by really letting each other know on a daily basis what's working and what you are grateful for, because that keeps everything kind of like up, right? It's like we can communicate in two ways. We either bring each other up or we bring each other down. So even noticing when I'm saying something to my partner, what's going on? What's the reaction on that side? Is he being lifted up, or is he feeling like, kind of like downward motion? Because if I can, because my job is to communicate something in a way, and again, it may not be, I don't want to sugarcoat stuff, but I want to say it in a way where, even the challenging things, where the people, where you can really hear me, and vice versa. Because if I communicate it in a way where it's, you can feel my truth and my sincerity, but I'm not blaming and judging. I'm just sharing from my truth of like, here's how I feel, here's what I need. And then this is another really beautiful thing. Would you be willing? So, if I can really look at what would ameliorate that situation, my feelings, my needs, from the needs. So would you be willing to, and then state whatever the need? And it's not a demand. It's not like, if you don't do this, I'm,
I'm leaving you, we're done.
but would you be willing to create an invitation rather than a demand? And I think too many people feel like that, my way or the highway kind of thing. Whereas if there's more of a sense of like, look, we're partners, we're working on this together, we want to have a great relationship. And we call our work inspired relationship or romancing the beloved. But, we want to have that kind of relationship that lifts us both up, so if I'm communicating in a way that you can take it in and you can feel my sincerity and my respect for you, huge. Because if our partners don't, if we don't feel respected, and nothing good is going to happen. All those things, we're learning, and honestly, where do you learn to communicate? You certainly don't learn to communicate by watching television or the news, or most people, it's right. Like it's a whole other ball game to learn to communicate in a way that actually authentically works.
Yes, I mean, I think about how my parents communicated. I'm having to still occasionally unlearn some of the things that they did to each other, which was not helpful. So I think ultimately it's having the willingness to commit to the practice, to have a relationship that's uplifting and fulfilling, because that is literally the result of having the willingness and the commitment and the practice to do that. So good. And ultimately we're in the process of undoing all of the not so great ways that relationship has been sort of, I don't know, idealized in the greater culture. And I think there's a lot of people moving away from that now, and we're still working on it to get to that place where we can be the models for a healthy relationship.
Exactly.
You bet, yeah.
Exactly. And I think that's the thing that, when people talk to us about, what is the most valuable thing that, we've given them, it's it's watching us, it's actually being in our presence and watching us, or, being the recipient of actually seeing people interacting in a healthy way,
and it works.
Yeah. So, that's the other thing, that if you have a relationship model at all, if there's anybody in your, watch them, look at them, see, listen to them. How do they interact? And if you don't have a healthy relationship model, get one. Find a healthy relationship model that you feel like, wow, I really like the way those people interact. What are they doing? And there's a lot of really good, relationship teachers out there, and you can kind of go through and listen to a few of them and see, who you relate to. But I think that's really important, is to have models, that you can actually look at and see what are they actually doing that's working.
Yeah. And I would highly recommend people connect with you if that feels inspiring for them. So I will put in the show notes a link to your website. I think I did that the last time, and you can just mention it again right now if you would like, and I'll make sure people can access it easily.
Thank you. Yes, it's talkinghearts.com, talkinghearts.com.
Beautiful.
So check us
Yeah,
out.
so this has been so good. Oh my gosh. I hope that people will feel really supported in creating healthier, more authentic, more fun, more loving, more magical relationships going forward.
Absolutely.
Some of these
And people can do it. It's like, the thing is that there's so many tools out there, and there's so much help, and there's so much, there's so many more places. I mean, when I was a kid, and my parents were, we were all going through stuff, there was nowhere to go, I mean, but now it's everywhere. So people can get the tools they need. They can get the NVC practice, they can get the gratitude practices, they can, they can really get good relationship technology that helps them. And as you're saying, it's the willingness to do it, the desire to do it, and then the commitment to practice that actually moves the goalpost, all the way to win.
Oh, I love that, relationship technology. I might have to title this that. So thank you again so much. And looking forward to when we might do this again.
Love
Bye.
doing this. So
Yeah.
much fun.
Yeah, thank you,
So
Kaylin.
fun.
Many blessings.
Bye.